So, welcome. Here we go. We're going to go beyond resilience. I'm Dale Sundermann, and what if you could take a pill that would improve your happiness, life satisfaction, and help you to deal with all the difficulties and challenges that you got? Wouldn't that be nice? Just take a pill? Well, it already exists. It's a little play on words, but if you got a purpose in life, researchers show that that's really one of the strongest common denominators for personal success and life satisfaction and positive well-being across all domains of life. So we're going to talk to that today. What's your purpose in life? What gets you up in the morning? And what is it that influences you to be who you're being when you're doing what you're doing? Right? Your purpose influences your identity and how you see yourself. So we're going to talk about this and kind of kick it off here, taking a look at that person which is probably most influential in helping us to understand the value of purpose in meaning, Viktor Frankl. In his book, Man's Search for Meaning. Now, if you haven't read it yet, I strongly encourage that you pick it up. It's a pretty easy find because it's been a bestseller for so long. It was published, Dr. Viktor Frankl published it after his time in a concentration camp. His survivor, Dr. Viktor Frankl, was a concentration camp survivor and the father of logos therapy, an entire division of therapy that recognizes the value of having purpose and meaning in your life. So, Viktor Frankl was a Holocaust survivor. His story kind of begins, he was taken, thrown on a train with his mom and his parents, and they were moved on. And when they disembarked, he was moved to be with the men, and his mom and his mother and father were moved into another section. And he said that was the last he ever saw of them. Of course, when you were gathered up at that time, you kind of took all of your worldly possessions, and for him, being a physician, his worldly possession was his personal manuscript and a few other things, and that was taken from him, and he had actually watched that destroyed right in front of him. So within a few moments, he lost everything that was important to him, and he knew that this wasn't, okay, I'm going to be seeing my wife and my parents. There was something inside of him that said, I may never see them again. And as they were gathered around, they were talking, old folks that had been in the camps for quite some time were sharing what it takes to survive. Do everything you can to survive. Simple, crazy things such as to make yourself look youthful so that you can continue to go even if you're feeling sick. Grab glass or whatever you can to kind of keep yourself clean shaven, because if you're clean shaven, you look more youthful. If you look more youthful, you look more healthy, and it's going to increase your likelihood of survival. Little tricks like that. And he was just sitting and taking it all in and dwelling over his loss. And he was approached by gentlemen that he didn't recognize, but that recognized him. And after a few moments of discussion, he realized this was somebody from his neighborhood. But he was so emaciated, Victor didn't recognize him, and he got up in front of Victor and he said, hey, you need to understand, you look like crap. And if I don't mind saying so, if you don't straighten up, you're not going to last a week. You're not going to survive. That moment, Victor started laughing. He goes, I just started laughing. He goes, everybody started to pay attention to me, looked at me, because I'm thinking, why do I want to live? What makes you think I want to live? But that emotional outburst, that what seemed like an unusual response in this difficult situation, helped him to understand, if I can laugh, I can live. And they can take and control my physical environment, but they can't control how I react to it. That stimulated a whole passion and sense of purpose while he was there to observe, to help his fellow concentration camp admittees, and he just observed, wrote, documented. And it was fascinating what he'd come to find. And he had recognized that if you had a strong enough why, you could withstand any how. Not unlike Friedrich Nietzsche, right? What doesn't destroy me makes me stronger. And so we take a look at that. Beyond resilience, you'll take a look at the slide that will come up. In life, we experience all sorts of disruptive change. And it's instinctively natural for us to attack it, to fight it back, to be resistant to it, to deny it. Another reaction very commonly is to just shut down. You're just going to shut down. We're just going to go numb. But in every case, every single one of us is going to get upset, right? We're going to be upset. Now, for most of us, we learn to cope with it. It's pretty natural. As human beings, we're biologically wired to deal with difficulties and challenges, so we're going to cope and eventually bounce back and be resilient. However, once upset, there is another path that some people take, and that's the path towards victimhood that spirals down into continuously reliving this one disruptive event until it becomes more than just that one event, but perhaps a series of events, a continuous experience that happens over and over and over and over again, in a future that you can't see without this continuous event. And so they shut down. And we got to be careful, because sometimes if the significant event, the disruptive event, it is difficult, it is challenging. And as victims and unable to deal with it, sometimes there can be some secondary gains that leaves people to continue to be stuck in that funk. But fortunately, we're biologically wired to kind of cope with things, to bounce back for the most part. But here's something that is even greater. We're also wired biologically to leverage disruptive events to actually thrive. There's a whole construct that most people are unaware of. At least they're definitely not as aware of it as they are of post-traumatic stress disorder. Right? When a disruptive event occurs, you're going to tank, you're going to experience distress. Absolutely. Post-traumatic stress symptoms, PTSD, happens to everybody following a traumatic experience. Now, whether or not they continue so long-term that they actually start to become a deficit and a continuous disability for an individual, that leads to PTSD. It's a disorder that they can't seem to have recovered from. But also the other opportunity is they thrive. Post-traumatic growth, right? That people actually get better and stronger following a traumatic experience. A research study done in Israel of soldiers of the Yom Kippur War, and following those that had experienced what we now call PTSD, and those that not only bounced back but actually were thriving after the war. They will say they thrived in spite of it, but others would find that since the vehicle that leads people to become these outliers of great growth, they can't be there without the disruptive event. Without the very same event that leads some people to be distressed, seems to be the same vehicle and requirement for great growth. So what is it? What's going on in there that changes? Well, Viktor Frankl and in his observations and his experience in the concentration camp identified a sense of purpose. Now, we've been researching this for a long time, and we know that having a reason or having a purpose for doing what you're doing, for living, for being, we know that not having a purpose in life is the leading common denominator for suicide, right? If you don't have a reason for living, that's the number one thing we ask. Do you have a reason for living? When people identify yes, then they can come up with all sorts of reasons why not to end their life. It's usually when people say, I can't stand this, I can't take this anymore, that now we're starting to take a look at somebody who doesn't have a reason. If you don't have a reason, you don't have a sense of purpose, we start to shut down and leave. So this sense of purpose in life, recovering from major injuries. Here's what's interesting. Individuals that have a sense of purpose, also studies correlate this with not necessarily religiosity, but religion or having a faith and identifying active in your faith. You actually recover from injury, major surgeries, anywhere from 1 to 3 days sooner than individuals that don't have a reason for living or don't have a sense of faith or greater power that they identify and practice towards. Fascinating stuff, right? So here's what we know. If you got a reason for living, you got a reason for going forward. And it's how we make sense and meaning of the situations. See, in some ways, as Viktor Frankl had once said, in some ways, suffering ceases to become suffering at the moment that your suffering finds meaning, such as the meaning of sacrifice. I mean, you go to school But if you're taking on classes and you're taking time away from other things you would otherwise enjoy, it's a sacrifice, right? But if your sacrifice has meaning that I'm doing this to get smarter, to have a better opportunity, better career, now all of a sudden it stops being a sacrifice and stops being miserable, and now starts to have a different connotation altogether. In fact, it can be engaging and motivating. So today what we're going to do is we're going to kind of create a tool that can serve to sustain us, to kind of help us out. So what you see here on the slide, to sustain us in the face of adversity can be a source of motivation, focus, determination, and resilience. You can call it a personal creed, you can call it a life philosophy, a pill, your purpose in life, or your philosophy in life, a purpose statement, a mission statement, whatever it is. But make sure that it helps guide you, who you're being, and what you're doing, to get rewards. Because we often talk about goals. I've been helping people for quite some time in my role as a clinician and as a consultant and coach. But you reach your goals, sure, but what if you got your goals leaning against, you get to the top of the ladder, but what if the ladder is leaning against the wrong wall? If you realize you get the goals, but this isn't quite what you wanted. This wasn't, and once getting the goal, it's not quite the experience you thought it was going to be. Yeah, there's also research out there that just simply pursuit of goals, just for goals, to attain goals, well then once you reach your goal, then you look to set another goal, and then you look to set another goal. So if your whole objective is to reach and obtain goals, you couldn't become successful. But that doesn't mean you're going to be happy. It doesn't mean you're going to be resilient. There's also not the correlation of well-being and life satisfaction. If you are pursuing goals because they're part of how you see yourself or your sense of purpose in life, that's when goals start becoming rewarding in these other domains, not just in the domain of success, but also in well-being and positivity. So, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a look. When writing a personal statement, when we get done with this, you're actually going to have your own personal mission statement. I've talked to many people. They've always wanted to write a mission statement, but they've been reluctant to do so. I can't tell you how many people have, when asked, have you read Stephen Covey's book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People? And many people have. How many of you have your mission statement? And then the hands go down, right? Even though in that book, Stephen Covey walks you through crafting a personal mission statement. Also, if you're looking at this for having a sense of purpose and value in the family and in the home, I strongly encourage that every family have a mission statement of the family. What is it? What is our purpose here? What is it that we value as a family? What are our, so that we can set our life goals and objectives based upon what we stand for, our family identity. So, first off, we're going to start off, we're going to go through this, and it's going to be, as Johnny had said, Mad Libs. All right, so we're going to run you through a couple of exercises, and that's what's going to make this much easier to do. I find that one reason why many people don't craft a mission statement is our love of choice. We love having choices. The thing is, we hate making choices. Because once you make a choice, then you're saying, I'm choosing this and neglecting all of this. Right? The other thing that makes people, I think that it's tough for people to write a mission statement is, what if I write it and I don't live up to it? Yeah. I mean, that's quite... I'm just sharing with you honestly, one of the things that kept me from writing mine. I'd actually for 2 years, so I crafted mine in 2003, yet for probably 2-3 years, I was helping people as a clinician, as a therapist, craft their own mission statements before I wrote my own. Yeah, little secret. And I realized that, wow, I was helping people find, their sense of purpose and their center when things go sideways, and I hadn't done it for myself. But I did, and I'm so glad that I did at the time that I did, because it really helped me to stay centered. So, first of all, we're going to start off with defining principles. All right, and in the handouts, if you pull down the handouts, you're going to find that that's on page 4. So defining principles. This here is kind of like, how do you want to be identified? What principles are the guides and structure of your life? They govern, just like natural principles govern our physical environment, there are principles that govern our development as people. So, Pick several words that represent the principles you value for which you most closely want to align and the way you want to walk your life, walk the walk through life. Rank them in order of importance, so identify at least, if you write down a whole bunch of them, then backtrack and identify what are my top 4. Okay? That's your defining principles. And take a moment now and if you want, pause and review that. Now that you've done that, we're going to take a look at understanding our values. Now, our values are very different than principles. Values are things that are important to us. Principles are kind of our guidelines, of how we, for human conduct. So what are the things that you value most? Many people say, oh yeah, I value family. I value financial security. I value, professional development, personal development. I value growth. Right? So understand, what are your values? Think about the things that are most important to you and write those down. Have a list. Or you can take a look at the list if you've got your handout. They're on page 5. Take a look and pick 4. All right. Excellent. Now we've done our values. See? Look at how fast we're moving. Now, what we're going to do is take a look. There are people that we respect and admire. Right? And so how can we be our best selves? Sometimes being our best selves means identifying those traits that we recognize the most in other people. It's a pretty tough task if you're going to try to expect you to know what you want, when you want it, how you want it, what it looks like, all of that stuff. So this is very, very useful. In our lives, we've got people that have had a profound effect on us. So identify 2 individuals. If you've got your handout on it's on page 6. 2 individuals. And think of the characteristics and the traits in them that you respect and admire. What is it that you admire most? And for each individual, identify 4 or 5, max of 10. If you have your worksheet, that's great. If you don't have a worksheet and you're just watching this, identify what are the characteristics, what are the traits, the things that you most admire. And if you're doing this on your own, in the handouts you've got a place to write a person's name. If you're not using the handout, write down the names of 2 individuals and what is it that you admire the most. Excellent. Now, this is a little bit more fun, and it's usually when done in a group setting in which I have a larger audience. It's usually at this point that I would have people talk and share back and forth. Who is it that you identified, and what is it that they bring to the table? What are the character traits that you admire? And it's really fun to hear and listen to people, because now we can see those in action. The next one is consider some of your strengths and talents. Right? There's all sorts of research out there that shows that when we are acting and operating within our strengths, we are more fulfilled, we have more success, we're more energized. It's values in action, or VIA. Seligman and Peterson put together theirs. We do that with the Master Resilience Training Program when we're trying to find out what are your strengths. Gallup and their research is the leaders in strengths and understanding personal work strengths. So if you're on page 7 and you have the workbook, we all have strengths and talents that enable us to achieve things that allow us to be really, really good, things that come a little bit easier to us than others. So there are a listing on page 7, but if you're doing this without the workbook, think about what are some of the things that you have as strengths. What are some things that come a little bit easier to you than to other people? It might be easy to identify. If anybody's ever said, oh, wow, you do this really well. Wow, it's interesting. Anytime you've received a compliment, right, in an area, that's probably a pretty good indicator that that's a strength. The thing is, sometimes things that are strengths to us come so naturally to us that when people give us a compliment, we're like, no, it's no big deal. Probably is. So take a step back, write it down. It may be things, again, that people recognize and identify. Maybe you've got personal strengths that other people don't know about. right? But that you keep to yourself. So identify those, write those down, and then kind of identify what your top 4 are. Now, as we are crafting our personal vision, comes the one we spend far too much time thinking about. In fact, when doing this in a group, most people find it tougher to identify what our strengths are than to find out this one. Okay? What is it that's standing in your way? All right? What are some of the things that you see that keep you from being able to achieve the things that you want to achieve? You know, is it because you're fearful? You procrastinate? Sometimes you're not motivated? You know, selfish? Whatever it is, right? These are the things. When I do this, people go, "Oh man, where do I begin?" Right? Because it's so much easier to beat ourselves up. But don't go writing down 15 of them or even 5, right? Pick 3. If you come up with a list of 4 or 5, what are the top 3 that you keep banging your head against? What is it that keeps standing in your way from having the kind of life that you desire to have? Now, this next segment here, now that we've taken a look at what gets in our way, is thinking in terms of relationships. We're social creatures. And what's fascinating is when people say, "I don't care what other people think." Right? Well, it's usually after they've looked at stuff and people have said stuff and they don't like it. And so then they get upset and they're trying to convince you they don't care. When if they really didn't care, they wouldn't bring it up at all. We all care. Why? Because we're social creatures. We're wired that way, right? It's what helps to perpetuate the species. In fact, if we don't pay attention to, you know, how we come across and how we interact with others, the reason why is so that we're allowed in the group, thus increasing our likelihood of being able to sustain and live and perpetuate our genes. If we're, you know, we're wired. If we did not learn how to deal and work and collaborate with other people, our lineage would stop, right? We'd be kicked out, kicked off the island. So, voted out. So let's think in terms of relationships. Project yourself forward in time, way forward in time, and pick 3 characteristics that you feel your boss would attribute to you, right? Especially if you're looking at this. 3 things that your boss, and repeat this process through how would you want your boss to describe you? If you're the boss and you think of yourself 40, 50 years in the future, you've lived a full life, how do you want those that report to you, those that you've led? How do you want them to identify you? How do you want to be remembered by your children? You know, what things would they say about you, the type of person you were? Right? Your spouse, your co-workers, your community. So take a few moments right now and think about these connections, these life connections you've got. How do you want to be remembered? All right, so now we've done the exercises. Pretty simple, not too painful. Now what we're going to do is we're going to put this and craft that mission statement that maybe you've been putting off doing if you've had an interest in doing it. So here's what we're going to do. To become the best person I can be. If you've got the activity sheet, the workbook, it's on page 11. If you've just been keeping track right now and writing down on a blank note sheet, pad of paper, here's how you can do. You'll start off with the statement, to become the best person I can be, I will. Next statement is, lead a life centered on the principles of blank, blank, blank. I fill in those 4 blanks with the 4 principles that you had done in the very first exercise. Next, remember that what is important in life is, and what are the 4 things that you had identified were most important in life? Again, these are making choices. There's tons of choices out there and there's no wrong one. But right now we're going to make a choice. What are the 4? Right? What are the 4 things that is most important in life that you had identified? Now, the next segment here is respect. I respect the admirable qualities in others, such as being, and then identify the 4 or 5, right? 4 or 5, as I implement similar characteristics in my life. So if you're doing this at home on a sheet of paper, you don't have the worksheet. Respect admirable characteristics in others, such as being, fill in the blank, as I implement similar characteristics in my own life. Now the next statement. Recognize my strength and develop the talent as a person who is, and write down 4 strengths. Right now, recognize my strength and develop talent as a person who is, charitable, giving, dependable, reliable, whatever your strengths are identified. And now the next statement is write down, acknowledge that I can be. And now this is where we identify our flaws, right? Those things that we don't like so much about us. Acknowledge that I can be and identify 3 of the things that kind of hold you back to sabotage. Acknowledge that I can be blank, 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 and strive to minimize my weaknesses and work to my strengths. So acknowledge that I can be blank, 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 and strive to minimize my weakness and work to my strengths. Now this is where we get to the final segment, how we want to be remembered, right? So beginning out with the statement, envision myself becoming a person who. Now in the worksheet it says, envision myself becoming a person who my peers think is 3 characteristics. That my boss thinks is 3 characteristics. That my friends think is, write down 3 characteristics. Maybe that others think is, write down 3 characteristics. All right, so there we have it. If you've done the exercises and the activities in just a few minutes, you now have documented your first version, your first of your mission statement, or of your vision statement, as some would say it, right? How you identify yourself, where you're going. Now, in a group setting, I'll ask people, what is the most challenging in this exercise? And the kind of feedback that I tend to get back is there were too many choices, in some of it. It's a little bit awkward, right? One of the challenges committing this to paper is a challenge, because now I'm reading it, Some people, again, I'm afraid I'm going to get called out, because we know we've got so many more faults than I put down here on paper. Why? Because we think about them all the damn time, right? If you thought more about your strengths, you'd know you got more strengths. But we think about our faults, and this is where we're coming back to being our best self and having a sense of mission and purpose. Now, it doesn't matter what job you have, what task you're doing, what life experience you're having. Are you being who you desire to be from moment to moment? And you can have a really crappy day. You can have blown it. And at the end of the day, reference your mission statement and say, well, you know what? I wasn't all of these things. So what am I going to do tomorrow? As long as you got a base of reference, you don't have to beat yourself up for the things that you have missed out on, or the failings, or things that you've done in the past, how they haven't worked out the way you wanted them to, how you wish they would have, how maybe you were taken advantage of or rejected, missed out on, opportunities you should have had but didn't get. Let it all go. Right now, you got a mission statement, going forward. So, now know this, crafting this statement, it's a journey, not a destination. It's going to seem a little bit formulaic when you write it down and you read it for the first time, because, well, it kind of is, right? That's what it is. So what we want you to do is we want you to rewrite it, right? Come back to it 24 hours later and edit. There might be a couple of the items about how you want to be remembered or thought of by others that are duplicates. If you are, get rid of those duplicates. You might find that being unmotivated and procrastinating, well, procrastination is more of the action because you're unmotivated. So instead of saying unmotivated, I'm unmotivated and procrastinate, just end procrastination. Right? Because if you end procrastination with action, you don't have to be motivated. You just have to end the action. And guess what? Research shows you've got this lagging. When you do something, you actually feel better about doing it. We used to think that having a positive self-esteem led people to getting good grades and studying longer. Nope, it turns out actually self-esteem is a lagger after people study longer and get better grades. So what we want to do is you tweak it up. So write it and rewrite it. And understand, again, this is a journey, not a destination. You've not now crafted your mission statement and said, all right, got it. No, carry it with you. Post it somewhere. So post it. And be patient with yourself, because you're going to look at it, and this is what keeps many of us, and me initially, is like, what if I don't live up to it? What if I'm not living up to it? Well, you're not. You want to write it future focused, so it's who you are striving to be. It's where you're going. Relax. Not everybody is there. None of us are there, right? We're all striving. We're all works in progress. And as long as we have our mission statement, whenever we have struggles, challenges, roadblocks, COVID, and other issues, drop and get in front of the goals and the objectives we have, well, we know where we're going. We've got our mission and purpose in life and who we're going to be when these things happen. So then we work around it, and they don't become the impediments that stop us and stall us. So be patient with yourself and look at it. Is it inspiring? If the model we just did doesn't inspire you, then rewrite it. Right? It's got to be inspiring. And not does it inspire anybody else, but does it inspire you? Does it make you want to take action? Right? If it doesn't, tweak it, rewrite it. Give me a call, send me an email. We'll make that information available to you. I'll tweak and I'll share with you and coach you like I've coached other individuals. In this forum, I'm sharing it electronically, but typically, I work with individuals and we will rewrite it. Revise it over time, right? If you don't have being a spouse or a family member in there because you're not married, you don't have kids, all of a sudden 5 years and you realize, wow, having a good time and living in the moment is very different now. So I'm finding that I have different priorities. That's okay. Rewrite it, recraft it. Revise it over time. So, Mahatma Gandhi. Right? But he said happiness is when what you think and what you say and what you do now are in harmony. Don't be pursuing happiness. We actually realize that happiness is a byproduct of the other things that we pursue. A sense of mission and a sense of purpose in our lives, who we're being when we're doing what we're doing, actually is a leading indicator of an individual's happiness. So excellent. So that's it. So I'm Dale Sundermann. Again, if you have any questions or comments, definitely give me a shout. Look me up. Send me an email. The contact information will be in the bottom. I'm being told in the bottom. Okay. So that's where it will be. So get a hold of me. I'd love to hear from you with any comments, feedback. Have a great day. Post it somewhere. If you're single, might score you a spouse. Right? I've shared that story with you guys. Mahatma Gandhi. Right? Whew. My lips don't always work right. Right? How's that?